most unexpectedly about coaching is the ability to hold space for people to process and work through emotions, but also facilitating sitting in the stillness to allow for prompts and awareness for growth. And, this is something that I am also learning simultaneously in my personal life of, holding space for myself to be able to process things, but also just how to create stillness or moments, or at least facilitate those moments for stillness, and to just sit in silence, which we rarely do in this busy world, right? There's always sound going on, there's sight, there's things that are plying for our attention at all times, and all of it, while a tool and very helpful for us to expand and compound our impact, it can be really, really challenging to get away from it because it's designed to work with our brains. Like the way that our brains are wired to want to do it, to feel that dopamine hit when we engage in different things, whether it is for learning or sharing or adding value, it's still, a form of consuming content in some way, shape, or form. And stillness and silence is really hard to come by in our modern world today, right? Like even, with living close to a highway, there's always noise, like 24 hours a day. Like there's always some kind of sound going on, right? Like there's never complete silence, in the natural sense, right? Because that's all like man-made sound. Because, even thinking like in nature, in the middle of nowhere, in the woods, right? Like there's never complete silence, right? But there is stillness. And so what I'm learning is intentionally creating these moments of silence to sit in the stillness is really an anti today's world way of living. And it's not about doing, it's about, taking the action and doing. But it's really about being in that moment. And we as humans have a hard time being. And I know that I am a human that has a very hard time with just being, right? Being present in the here and the now, being still long enough and quiet long enough, especially in my mind, to be able to hear the voice of God, and to be able to just be quiet. Right? I mean, you're listening to this podcast right now. Maybe you should pause it for a second, for 2 minutes, not a second, 2 minutes, and just be still, right? Not looking to get out of it something, but to practice being still and being okay with silence. One of the things I've learned, being a social seller myself and then coaching my team, is silence is good, but silence feels really awkward. And we as humans are compelled to fill the silence. This is something deeply rooted in us. I would say that it stems from our own will, from our sin nature, that we always need to be doing. And it inhibits us from being. And so I would just encourage you, pause this for 2 minutes and sit in silence and welcome the stillness, not for what you can get out of it, but to just do it as a practice. This is something, so my husband and I, we just started a class at church called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. It's based on the book of the same title by Peter Scazzaro is his name. That's right. And it, we we don't tend to think about our emotional wellness or our emotional maturity, or immaturity very often, right? And I'm someone, if you've listened to me for a while, like I struggle with feelings. Like I'm more about doing, like let's just get out there, let's do it, let's roll our sleeves up, let's do the work. Like I am comfortable in that space of working and creating and building and driving forward. Like that is my zone that I love being in. But it doesn't it doesn't work unless well, and this is what I've learned, it doesn't work well or for very long if I don't create this space or facilitate or prompt this space for myself of being first, right? Because when it comes to our mindset, the things that we do, the way that we feel is actually a product of what we think about ourselves, especially who we think we are, right? And in the process of becoming and leaning into identity, that is what prompts our feelings, which prompts the things that we do or don't do. And that is what creates our outcomes, right? And so when we think of it in this way, that like even though my zone is getting out there, doing, going, right, creating, driving forward, if I haven't started with being first, then I am going to go into that essentially with no direction. I'm going to blaze forward and trip a lot because I don't have that clarity of the who I am of in those moments of being. And so, it's not to say that we can't do, right? I think that we need to do, and I always refer to that as putting legs on that prayer, right? But it's kind of a cart before the horse thing. Like we need to be still and be quiet with the Lord, in our spirituality, and then that prompts us and compels us forward into action. However the Lord is leading us, because it's easy to do our own will, right? It's much harder and a lifetime thing to surrender our will at the foot of the cross and to do God's will, right? And and so this is something that I am struggling with. But last night in our class, the question was asked, what? Okay, cool. The question was asked, what makes you really feel alive? And of course my mind immediately went in like a million directions, as it does. My mind does not like to be quiet. It likes to run at all hours of the day and night, and just it can be chaos in there a lot of times. This is why I stumble over my words a lot, because my mouth can't keep up with my brain. And personal problem there. But it is something that I'm learning and growing in, to slow down, to think first. And yeah, it's just laughable, right? Like, raise your hand if that's you too. Yeah, I know you. If you're listening on the podcast, you can't see me right now, but yep, that's me. Anyway, and so this question was posed in our class last night of like, what really brings you to life? Like, what gives you life? You love doing it. And I thought of a lot of like doing things, but it's interesting because my answer actually was more about being than doing. Because the thing that makes me feel most alive is coaching, seeing something in somebody else before they can, and helping them through that process of seeing it for themselves, and being there in those moments when they do see what I've seen all along that's possible for them, and leaning into it. That just it's just this principle and my driving mission of helping people help themselves. Because you teach a man to fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to you give a man a fish, that's what it is, he eats for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, he'll feed his family for a lifetime, right? And so that's why I love coaching, and I love that for people. Like, I love that we really have the answers within us because the Lord lives in us, right? So we have the Holy Spirit leading and guiding us and speaking for us when we can't speak, and and all those things. But when we sit back and think about it, we don't need someone to give us the answers. What we need is we need someone who is really good at holding space for us and creating this place where we can sit in the silence and the stillness. Someone who, through asking good questions, prompts this introspection, this curiosity and compassion for why is it that I'm doing that? What is it that I'm thinking? What is that making me feel? And so on and so forth, and creating the outcomes that we have. And do I like those? And if not, let's get curious and leave with compassion on how we can change those things. Like, that is coaching in a nutshell, right? Like, it's not giving the answers. It's simply facilitating through good questions that for somebody else, holding that space for processing and thinking, and helping them to sit in that stillness and focus on that being, right? And then doing is a product of that. So I just want to share this with you because this is something that, again, our culture, our society does not do, and often doesn't even attempt, right? I mean, we always have noise filling our space. And, I know if you're listening to this, because this is a growth and mindset podcast, like, that's what the whole point of this podcast is. You're someone who is very good at getting out there and doing and challenging yourself. Or you at least want to get better at that, right? As I think we all do. But it's the being still, being good with silence, not trying to fill it at all times, right? Like think of a conversation. I know I used to be very good at making myself feel completely awkward by filling silences with my voice, with my words. And it would make them so awkward because I would just say things. I would let the words just flow out of my mouth about whatever, didn't matter. And led to a lot of foot and mouth moments and so much awkwardness that just didn't need to be there. And a big growth piece for me, and actually came from working with one of my mentors, was being able to embrace those pauses, to facilitate those pauses, and to be able to sit in them and not fill them. And then to be able to lead someone else through questions rather than answers or awkward things, right? And that has been a skill that I've been able to develop much better. I mean, I still have moments where silence feels awkward and it doesn't feel natural, and I feel the need and feel compelled to fill it with mindless chatter, but I don't, because in those moments I'm able to embrace that pause. And so while I'm able to do that in conversation and in coaching, it is not a practice that I have done well in just my own life. in those moments, just yesterday, I kept telling my husband, I was like, I feel like I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew, and I don't drink Mountain Dew. I felt jittery. I am someone who I am usually moving, but I'm not like nervous moving. And yesterday I just was like, I felt like I was all over the place, and like I just felt this, I don't know, overwhelming urge to just be doing it all moments of yesterday. And honestly, I think when I'm looking back at this, and as I was talking to Zach about it, and I think that it was my body balking at the awkwardness of digging deeper into emotional health, and which is probably one of the weakest areas for me, is not only being able to identify and name the ways that I'm feeling, those emotions, but being able to process them like a wave coming in, and then being able to process them out, letting them go. this is something that is very challenging for me, as someone who is very optimistic, which is, I think, is a good thing, that we can always find the blessing in even the darkest situation, is not helpful when it comes to holding space and being good with silence and stillness. And also actually doing the work through the ways that I'm feeling so that they don't get buried and buried and buried until, my husband and I call this a rucksack. Like, I would just throw all the negative things into my bag, into my rucksack, and eventually it would get so full that it would explode and it would have to be dumped all over the place. And usually in the silliest, most inopportune moments, that, like, it's like the feather that broke the camel's back, right? Like those kinds of things, where something so small and insignificant would be the final straw that would just cause the explosion all over the place. Not a healthy pattern, and something that I have over the last couple of years been very aware of and have been consciously working through, not always very successfully. So anyways, leading up to this class, I think that this was my body, like, reacting to the potential and oncoming awkwardness of what, in my mind, this idea of emotional healthiness, emotional health, emotionally healthy spirituality was going to mean and was going to look like. And in my mind, to me, it's a lot of awkward role playing and awkward silences that I'm going to feel compelled to fill. But instead of regarding other people, it's me. And so I was telling my husband last night too that, I think, like, going through this course is good, and I feel like there are areas where I have already grown a lot in, and there are definitely areas that I still have a lot of growing to do. But one thing that came to my mind as I was going through this was, on the question of vulnerability. I am someone who, like, I love vulnerability. I think that there's power in it. I think it can be used for so much good in the right situations. And yet, well, and weakness too, right? Like, I show the real life reel and not just the highlight reel of my life. And yet, when it comes to that, am I choosing which weaknesses that I do share because I have already worked through it and there's positive light on myself in the way that I've grown on the other side, right? But the weaknesses that I don't often share are the ones that I am currently struggling with, that there is no light on the other side yet of positive growth in that area, right? Or light to paint me in, like this overcomer type of way. Like, no, like there are areas that I struggle still all the time, right? And so in social selling on my team, so for my upline, I am the strongest leader. I have the biggest volume. I have the biggest team. I have leaders who are doing what I'm doing. So I have this sort of image that is true, is very true. And yet sometimes I feel almost like an imposter when I'm not maybe performing or behaving or doing the things in a way that I think that image implies. And so and there are things that, like, showing up for our team call, I know my team's going to be on there. So for me to be on there, like, that just seems like something that I need to do, right? And so I shared something on our team call this week that, I said I've been coaching with my upline, and for some reason, because of this image in my mind, I haven't felt as willing to share certain weaknesses and vulnerabilities in my business, I think, while others I definitely do. And so on this call, I did share with them that, I think that I've formed this story in my mind that, if I'm not running hard in my business and actively out there recruiting and bringing on new customers in large amounts, that I'm not living up to that image. And, um, and then thinking through that, I was really struggling this year with what goals I wanted to have in my social selling business. Because I just wasn't feeling led to set these huge goals, to make this a running year, to push hard. And that felt really uncomfortable for me. And I started creating these stories in my mind that meant I was being lazy, or that I was dropping the ball, or not living up to this image, or, all these things. And, essentially feeling like a failure in my business. And it's because I was looking at the gap of where, like, I think that people think that I should be, or think that I am, but where I really am. And, but here's the beautiful thing about my business is that, all the work I've done over the last 10 years has brought me the benefits of being in the place that I am, that I don't have to, unless I want to, be out there actively recruiting and bringing on new customers. And of course, I always want to help people help themselves. And that starts with health. And that starts with having a way to create, outside of your four walls, that kind of thing. And so, of course, I always want to be doing that and positioned to do that, right? But what I needed in my business, and this is what my mentor helped me in coaching me on, was what are the small things that you can do to stay active in your business that don't necessarily move it forward in these great growth capacities, but maintains and fosters, further, I don't want to say harvest, but further development, or solidifying all of the work that I've done, right? Like, and so what we decided on were just very simple things of making sure that every time someone orders with me, that I'm saying thank you and how much I appreciate them. And also just to show a practical appreciation to them, adding a free sample onto their next order, right? And making sure that I am adding value through my community of, people who are using the products, building the business, that I'm adding value through, sending them emails that are helpful to them, right? Like, not just sending emails of these are the sales, come by, but like actually adding value outside of the standard type of emails. And, like, I literally have it right here, like on this Post-it that says thank you texts, add multitasker samples. And I had a question mark with 1 email a week. And that's what I've been doing. Like, I created an email. Well, I always use an email calendar to plan it all out. But I did that. And yesterday I spent time writing those emails. And like, those seem so small and so insignificant when I hold it up to this image that I think that I, have of like, oh man, I'm not like the rock star out there, like recruiting the most people, like expanding my team the most, like having the like biggest volume growth months, like, but that is not where I'm at right now. Right now, I am able to sit on the other side of maintenance of all the years of work that I did do, that I know that the people on my team and on our overall team, they are working towards now. And honestly, even though this is so uncomfortable for me to sit in this season of small steps and maintenance, it really is the symbolic, I guess, piece or symbolic mirror of holding space and sitting in the stillness of my business. which I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that totally makes sense to me, that like I'm doing this work in my life, my personal life, right? And just like the work that I do in my business bleeds over, like it's not. And I was just, we were doing a deep dive with a client today, through my collab coaching program that we just launched, starts next week. And I challenged her to think of her business not as just a component or a compartment of her life, but seamlessly integrated with her life as a whole, a holistic thing. And to look at work in her business as her act of worship to the Lord, of her obedience, of her laying down her will to follow the Lord's will, and helping people to change their lives, helping people to help themselves, helping, create these communities, all of these things. And that's like that's what's going on right now for me, is that, I'm looking at the way that God has led me along through the years of following his will. And I always say, like, I have all these tools in my belt to help people, right? Whether it's wellness, nutrition, fitness, mindset, parenting, marriage, faith, hello. Like all of these things, they all feel like tools in my belt. And, there were many years where I'm like, how do I put all these together to help people? But the thing is, it's more about the becoming and the being, right? Not this component, or this component, but how it all comes together so that I am able to show up for people in the way that that they need, right? Like not this specific, like one size fits all, like, oh, this is my program, this is how I do it. Like, there are multiple ways that I get to help people. And God has equipped me for that. And it's so funny. Like someone just said to me today, like, oh, that should go on your vision board. And then I was looking through pictures on Facebook, which, can I just say, like, I know, social media is a tool, right? Like, and a lot of people think that it's a tool of the devil. Can it be? Yeah. But can it be a tool for good? Absolutely. And that's what I believe. But anyways, I was looking through some old pictures, looking for a picture, and it was just a moment of like, wow, look at all these pictures. Look at all these seasons of my life captured and held here, in this one place. And honestly, and the saying of like, I used to pray for the things that I have now, or whatever that saying is. And the funny thing is, I didn't, because my life today is nothing like I ever imagined it. It's so much better. Like, I've shared this before, that my vision for my life, 10 plus years ago, or I guess 15 plus years ago and more, was to get married, to have a family, to buy a house, and to stay there forever. Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that God doesn't allow us to do that when we're willing to obey him, because I would have been so bored, and he knew that. And our life is full of so much adventure and ups and downs and unknowns, and probably would scare the crap out of most people. But we have just seen God in so many situations, and it's laughable, because like, even for our upcoming move, before we knew where we were going, we knew that it was coming. We had made our list, we had done all these things, but and so we had our ideal place of where we thought we should go. And my tendency is, what is that? My tendency is to get really like detailed in my brain of what I think is going to happen, where I think we should go, like what we're going to do there and what it's going to be like. And then God sends us somewhere completely like unexpected. And it's like, oh, like I spent all that time up in my brain, like thinking through all this situation scenarios. And it's laughable, because God's way is always better. And I know that, because that's how it goes every single time, that he sends us exactly where he wants us to be. And we usually don't know why until after, and when we're looking back. And so, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but just looking at really we get the direction for our lives when we're able to hold space for ourselves, to be able to think through things with curiosity and compassion, right? But then sitting in the stillness to proactively create this environment for stillness and silence so that we are being and not just always doing. I was sharing with my husband last night that I tend to listen about the same way that I read, and I read very quickly and I miss a lot because I read so quickly. And I think that I listen the same way. I'll grab onto like the first few things and just take off running with it, right? And how often have I probably missed out on some instructions from the Lord because I went off blazing the trail without the full instruction manual. And so that was a challenge to me last night in thinking like, I am very much into being obedient to the Lord. Like I tell my husband all the time that like, that's what I want most of all, is that I just want to do what the Lord wants me to do. Like I truly do. But how often do I not practice stillness and silence and sitting and being? And so I only hear a little bit and then I take off running, when there was so much more that I just didn't listen for because I wasn't willing or able to be quiet and still long enough. And so like, and I don't think of that like in a way to like shame myself, like, whatever. Like I think of that in a way of like, okay, God is really putting on my heart that he wants me to practice stillness and being with him. And I'm excited about it, but also terrified because I'm not good at just sitting and doing nothing. It's very difficult for me. It is not natural for me. And so let's stop with that. Today, I would encourage you to just a couple times practice stillness, be intentional about it. 2 minutes. So our study is having us do 2 minutes of silence and just being still, and not necessarily praying either, but more like prompting with a prayer word of like, be still. And that's been mine, is like, be still, be quiet, and telling myself that over and over as my mind starts to wander, which it does so much. But just making that a practice, maybe just one time a day. Personally, I love the stillness of the morning. I do. I think it's because my soul is craving that and longing for that, even though my mind is like, let's go. Like, we got so many things to do, right? Like, let's get a start on it before anyone gets up. But it's been a forced yet very beneficial practice for me to wake up a little earlier than my family to have that stillness. But it's a practice. So it's something that I don't know that necessarily will ever be perfected, but it is something that is important and I am prioritizing and willing to work on, which doesn't really make sense. I would say work on prioritizing it and being intentional with it, because it's really about that being, and everything flows from that being. So be quiet today, my friends.